Well, it really is wonderful to be here, and it's been a blast from the past. As I stepped in and met friends from a long time ago, and as Yasmin shared, I've dabbled in a lot of different type ministries, but I have to say I got my calling at Bear Cabin at Camp Kalakwa. Sitting on the porch, that's when I knew I wanted to spend time sitting with people. And I thought my calling was to run summer camps, Phil. And then somebody lied to me and told me I had to get an MDiv degree. I don't know who that person is, but God and I are going to take care of that. And so I started my journey into MDiv. I was a youth pastor for a number of years, and then I dabbled into our educational world. So I taught at Forest Lake Academy, then I taught at Shenandoah Valley Academy, and then came back into the congregational work over at the Mandarin Church in Jacksonville. And after a number of years there, I was reminded that I wanted to sit on the porch of Bear Cabin and talk to people. So I got into clinical ministries. And for the last 14 years, from Texas now to Tampa, I've had the opportunity of serving in that world. So I come before you standing on the three pillars that we have here today. Well, now it's four, I just realized. The camp world, the pastoral congregational world, the educational world, and the clinical world. And all of those individuals have policies. All of them have procedures. All of them have guidelines. And if you get to know me and you've come to my office, you know that Joey loves structure. I come in the morning and the first thing I do is make a list to organize my list for the day. And nothing makes me happier than to just get things done. But there's something we have to remember, because you know this, but we forget that it always starts with people. And it always ends with people. Procedures are just the process of how we engage and help people. Let me get my little clicker here. I grew up 5 minutes from here. And I came up yesterday afternoon to help my daughter. She was moving from an apartment to a rental house. And dads who are in the room, you know our jobs. Putting stuff on the wall, going to Home Depot, getting all the stuff she needs, setting stuff up, moving a box from here to there and then back over to there. You know the thing. But as we're driving through Orlando, I'm saying, yeah, when I was a kid, I did this over here. When I was a kid, I did this over here. Here's a family in church. It's not my family, because the family picture of me growing up in the Altamont Springs church would have been so more chaotic. We sat in the same pew every Saturday morning. We sat in the same order every Saturday morning. My dad, me, my mom. I'm the middle child, known as electricity, or my grandmother would say electricito, because I couldn't sit still. Pastors, I'm the one who ruined all your tithe envelopes. I'm that kid. I'm that kid that would pull the little plastic sleeve in your communion cups and put them on all the fingers and do this. I'm that kid. But I'm also that kid whose dad's hand weighed about 2,000 pounds when he finally places it on the shoulder. And he gave you that look that didn't have to speak in English or Spanish, but it was universal, that says, I brought you in and I'll take you out. And as a child, I remember when I got that hand and I got that look, I just felt his eyes on me the whole day. And so happens, Rainey Hooper, who was my pastor at the time, he was preaching, and I still remember clearly about how God is always present, that God always watches you. And I'm sitting here going, I know what the death ray from him is feeling like. Well, what is the ray from him? And I turned to my mom and says, Jesus is always watching me? She goes, oh, yeah. I'm going, that's creepy. And throughout my theological life, I've really had to unpack that. Was the God of the laser beam who kept his eye on me all the time? Or was he a God of a different presence? The reality is, the ministry of Christ was different. And today we're going to be simple, folks. We're not going to go blow your mind. We're just going to take you back to Bear Cabin. Because the reality is, the God that we serve sees you. The God that we serve hears you. And the God that we serve is present. And I don't know if you've gone back to cradle roll mindset of theology that you have and thought that through, but I think as leaders in our denomination, in our organizations, in the institutions that we put our fingerprints all over, we need to stop and remember these type of things. When Jesus was reading in the synagogue, he quoted Isaiah, read from Isaiah, as a way of proclaiming his calling. And he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, to bind up the broken heart, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and to comfort all who mourn." As I said, I've worked for Advent Health now for the last 14 plus years. And I remember the first time, Jay, where I was invited for an interview at Hughley Hospital. And I flew over. I was from Jacksonville. I flew over, and I was a Florida boy. It's the first time really in Texas. And I said, who in God's name put a hospital out here? I drove from Dallas and through Fort Worth and came to Hughley. And that was the old building. Beautiful building, I think built in 76 or something like that. And I don't know if, I love trivia, and Jay knows this, that Hughley Hospital was the first hospital in North America to build an all-private room hospital. So, way to go, Adventists. So, I walked in, and as soon as I walked in the lobby, they had Extending the Healing Ministry of Christ on the wall. And they had it in a way that was absolutely gorgeous. And I still remember thinking to myself, is that wall art, or is it more? And I quickly found out from the CEO to the EVS that this was a culture DNA of how we saw people, heard people, and were present with people. And it reflected the ministry of Christ of what you see here. And the first point I want to remind you is that Jesus sees you. He sees you. Not the way my dad saw me in church, but he sees you with a compassionate eye. If you read the life of Christ, the man moved around. And I love my pastors here, don't get me wrong. But Jesus was the worst pastor that ever walked this earth. He never built a church, he never took tithe, and he never baptized. And Jeff would fire you on the spot just for that. Just kidding. But he was the most amazing chaplain because of the way he engaged with people. You see, as Jesus walked from town to town, from village to village, synagogue to synagogue, to field work, to markets, to parties, to weddings, to funerals, he saw people. And according to Matthew, it says when Jesus saw the crowd, he had compassion on them. And the word compassion means something within my soul stirs up that I want to come alongside you. There's something within me that draws me to you, to your joys, your excitements, your sadness, your hurts, your pains, your loss. I want to be with you because I see you. Jesus was very passionate about seeing individuals. And the 3 points that I'll be sharing with you, starting with He sees you, talks about the ministries that Jesus has. And the second one is that He hears you. Now, I grew up in a Puerto Rican home. They're not quiet homes. I married a Midwestern Kansas girl. That's a quiet home. The first time I went out to the middle of Kansas, I flew into Kansas City. We drove to a little town of McLouth. They used to have a flashing light. It fell down. Nobody bothered putting it up. They said, we don't need it. Dad was a farmer. He was born 3 miles from where he lives. We pulled up middle of the night, and I said, oh, Lord, they brought this Hispanic to get rid of him out in the middle of nowhere. Pulled in, walked in, we had dinner. After the main greetings, nobody said anything. They're just around the table eating. Then we moved to the living room. They got their books and their magazine. No one said anything. So it was time to go to bed. Denise went to her prospective room. I've heard about farmers' girls and dad, so I was very respectful. I bowed, see you in the morning, and said, she came to give me a heads. No, Dad's right there. It's good. Went to bed. I have never been to a place that the crickets were so loud I could not sleep. They were like, I think all 50,000 were at my window screaming at me. At 3 a.m, the door opens, and there's your dad. I'm going, take me now, Jesus. It's all over. And he goes, boy, I need you. I go, need me for what? I need you to pull a cow. Going, it's 3 a.m. We're going to pull it. And he just walked, and I had to go follow. And we went out, went down the barn, and I really thought it was. Walked in there, and there was a six-legged cow laying on its side. I'm going, I didn't grow up on a farm, but that ain't right. And he says, we got to pull that calf. So we wrapped some chains around that back legs of those calves, and he gave me the bar with the chain wrapped around. Says, I need you to pull. I'm thinking, it's a baby. So I'm just tug. He goes, no, I need you to pull. And I pulled as hard as I could. I delivered a cow. Okay. And then the dad did something really interesting. He starts kicking the cow, Phil. I'm going, it just gave birth. He says, got to get it up or the back will paralyze. We got to get it up. So breakfast, I'm telling the story. And I looked at Denise, if we get married, we have a kid, I know exactly what to do. I'm going to kick you to get you up. 30 years, remember, 30 years she's been with me. But what was fascinating about that family, as quiet as they were, that man, Denise's dad, he heard everything I would say. We'd be on tractors. We'd be baling hay. We'd go every spring to bring the calves in. We'd have these amazing talks, and he would listen. He would take every word I said, wouldn't respond until he formulated a thought, and then he just zinged me with insight. He hears you. Jesus heard people in the middle of coming out of a town surrounded by people, leaders ushering him over. He heard a woman cry out, help me. Help my daughter. Help me. People, come on, Jesus, we got to go. And he stopped. And he addressed her. And he says, woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. Now, I know the life of a chaplain. I know the life of the educator. I know the life of the pastor. We're busy. Jeff, you're right. We're the keepers of the processes and the policies and keeping the ship afloat and in the right direction. And that gets busy. And I know that Sabbath is our day of rest, but pastors, I know that's your busiest work day. Because really, you're all Sunday keepers because Sunday is when you rest. But we can be so busy that we do not hear our people. We can process the claims. We can process when Yasmin sits with me and we have to do separations. We can process all that, and we can forget to hear the people. But Jesus never stopped hearing. Point 3. He's here. He's fully present. I love Christmas. I'm a Christmas nut, to be honest. And for the last 2 to 3 years, my wife and I, we have traveled to Germany every December and done the Christmas markets. And if you've never done that, put it on your list because you'll never fully understand the beauty of Christmas. When you walk into a Christmas market with billions of lights and music and food and stuff, you have no idea what it is, but they're guzzling it as much as fast as they can. But it is gorgeous. Our first night, the first time we did it, we were in Munich. We walked to the first market and it started snowing. I go, that's it. This Florida boy, I've hit gold here. But there was a problem. Everywhere I went, I saw Christmas, but I didn't see Jesus. I didn't see a lot of focal point that according to John, it says the Word became flesh. The promise that was given in the garden, that one day God would come and make things right, not from afar, not from an email, not from a message, but in flesh. Jesus came and became skin, bones, breath, blood. He was here and is here. We serve a God who is alive. But we're also one of the most busiest people in the world. Some of you remember life before cell phones. Alan, pastoring was a lot quieter back then. Now we're tied to this little device. And the most ways of communicating that has ever been on this earth. And we're probably the loneliest group of people that's ever happened. Because we're not fully present. Just next time you're at a stoplight, look around. See how many people are on their phones. Next time you're in a restaurant, see how many parents put the phone in front of their kids. Next time you're out and about, how many couples are not fully present. It's really fascinating because in our world, in clinical world, when we teach them clinical pastoral education, it's about being fully present. And it really puts people off, centered sometimes when you're fully present. I had an educator who was so present that anything I did, he questioned. He goes, your left ear twitch, what does that mean? Oh, your eyebrows went up. What are you trying to say? Whoa, you crossed your arms. Tell me what that's all about. I would go to class, Jay, and I would just... Now, that's too far. But the reality is when someone stops you in the hallway, comes to your office, sits across the desk, whether you're there to help them in the process of joy, whether you're there to correct, guide, are you fully present? Are you fully in tune, as I call it, in a 360 view of what is happening around you, how you're impacting, how they're impacting, and what is happening? See, Jesus was never rushed. Not by the woman at the well, not by the blind man calling out, not by the demoniac, not by any individual in the stories that we have. Jesus was fully present at all times. So this morning, what is your role? We've talked about different roles here this morning already. What is your calling? And what is your ministry? Because if you are just doing HR policies and handling people, that is still a ministry. Too many people, at least in the hospital, that try to understand what chaplains do, think that ministry is about what the chaplain does when he comes into the room, prays, and leaves. It's not ministry. It's part of it. But it's also the EVS that when I'm walking the hall, she goes, "Hey, Joey, I just spent time with patient in room 202, and this is what's going on." And I sat and listened. I go, "You did great ministry." Or the person who welcomes you into church or welcomes you in the office. Ministry is how we treat others through our calling and our role. The beautiful woman that I've been married for 30 years is probably the best HR person I've ever met in my life. She's worked for our denomination. She's worked in higher education and HR. And there are times I come home and I go, I need you to put your HR hat on. What would you do in this situation? And then there are times I said, please take your HR hat off because I want to tell you what I just did. And I can just see her doing this stuff. But she also has her SHRM. And SHRM is the Society for Human Resources Management. And according to SHRM, it says that the role of HR is to plan and deploy human resources to enable an organization to achieve its goal. HR department needs to be the proactive and serve as partners in determining strategic direction. I like a plan. I like something that tells me this is what we're going to do, this is why we're doing it, and this is what we're going to accomplish. But there's no humanity in this paragraph. Remember how I started. It starts with people and ends with people. I remind you, the ministry of Christ said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me. And I would say he has anointed you to proclaim the good news. And proclaim does not mean standing up there. To proclaim the good news is sitting on the porch at Bear Cabin with anybody who you have invited or have asked to come and sit on the porch with you. To bind up the brokenhearted. Unfortunately, too many times when an individual comes to HR, we have to solve problems. They have issues. They have struggles. Instead of jumping to the response policy, I wonder what happens if we can bind up that broken heart, that we can see, hear, and be fully present to touch the gooiness of their heart, and then to proclaim the freedom for all captives. Because as you go home today, you will be captive on I-4, I guarantee it. But if you look out your windows, you're going to see hundreds and thousands of people who are also captive, who are also looking for freedom. And you are carrying the key to help them with that freedom. Our role, according to SHRM, and I agree, is to plan and deploy human resources to enable the organization to achieve its goal. We want to accomplish those things in our denomination, in our churches, in our schools, in our camps, and in our hospitals. But it has to go another layer, which is our calling, which is to proclaim the good news, to bind up the broken heart, to proclaim freedom, and to comfort all who mourn. And why do we do that? To follow the example of Christ with compassionate eyes, listening ears, and undistracted presence of the heart. You have been called into sacred work. And sacred work just doesn't happen. It's intentional. See, Christ, when he walked this earth, he was never interrupted. He was never derailed. He was intentional to hear, see, and to be present. Today, as you go through workshops, you're going to hear some valuable information. But I beg you, I pray for you, I ask you to remember, it starts to the calling to serve people, and it will always end of the calling to serve people. God bless.